Jiu-Jitsu is not a gigantic money-making endeavor typically. And for them to take out the time to take a risk on some relative unknowns or something like that and invest in their own marketing perhaps too, which I think is incredibly wise of them in retrospect. And you see why they are so successful, because they take those risks constantly. They fail constantly. I'm sure there's a ton of these podcasts that come and go, and ours won't be around forever either. But for them to do that and push ahead and take that risk is very smart and super cool too, right?
Welcome everyone to another episode of Elbows Tight Podcast. Your host Travis. Today I have a very good friend, very influential person in my podcasting and jiu-jitsu career, Adolfo Foronda from the Forever White Belt podcast. How you doing today, Adolfo?
Hey, good, Travis. Thanks so much for having me on again. This is great.
Dude, no, thank you. We talk, we talk probably about a couple times a week, it seems like.
Yeah.
And then I'm always like, man, I got to get Adolfo back on, because you and I had each other on our
Yeah.
podcast very early. Like,
Yeah.
I was just thinking about it, and I was like, man, Adolfo had me on, and I think our podcast was maybe, it was like probably about 2 years old, but we were like small, like analytically, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I look back at it now, I'm like, man, I am so blessed that Adolfo did that, man. So, and then
I'm just so happy you kept going too, and that I kept going, and like,
dude,
we have all this like interesting stuff to talk about all the time,
yeah, absolutely. And it's what a crazy ride it's been. I feel like both of us have had like exponential growth lately, and it's so cool seeing. I'm like I feel like we're like the underdogs in the industry, because everyone else is like these big names that have their own podcast, and then it's like a bunch of like random dads.
Yeah, it seems like it. But there has been such an explosion of interest, within the whole jiu-jitsu realm and podcasts and video, YouTube and everything, that it's been so interesting. And then seeing your progression from when we spoke, what was that, a year or 2 years ago? I don't know.
Yeah,
And
it was
then,
a long time ago.
jiu-jitsu wise, what you were doing, your show itself. I know you had a co-host at the time, John, who was really great, and how you had to evolve. Seeing all that has, I'd really like to talk about that stuff too, and find out what, where you're at now, and just that road also there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I know. And like I feel like, dude, you've like just like your guests also. The big thing that with me that I talk about behind the scenes, and is like, as like an interviewer, I have like a list of people that I find are very inspiring for me to listen to, because they ask great questions, and you're one of them.
Oh, thank
It's
you.
like Sean Evans, the hot ones, right? Obviously, because
Yeah.
he's great.
Yes.
Nardwar on
Love
YouTube,
Nardwar. God, I love
right?
Nardwar.
So you, um, Abe from Main Idea, Abe Maynard, he's another one that asks fantastic questions. And so I have like these group of people, these core people that I listen to, because I'm like a student of the game. I'm always trying to think of like, what are better ways to
Mhm.
ask questions, and how are other people asking questions? Because no one wants to hear the same boring,
Right. Ex-
simple questions over and over again.
Right.
Who do you look up to as like an interviewer to
Oh
like kind of
gosh.
emulate their style, or try to uh perfect your craft like that?
Well, like inspiration wise, definitely like someone like Rogan, for his just the way he can interpersonally get along with people just naturally. Uh and then someone like maybe Alex Friedman for that sort of, long form, sort of dry discussion type of stuff. And a big fan of the Kwan brothers, Steve Kwan and Matt Kwan. They're just fantastic at what they do. Um, Stephen Kesting from
Hmm.
is really fantastic also. Gosh, there's so many. Simon Sinek, I really like his podcast a lot. He's very passionate, in his approach, and it feels very spontaneous and natural. Um, and then just like all these different interpersonal styles too, of like, we're going to have a conversation with each other, or someone, as you mentioned, is going to ask a question and just kind of sit back and sort of listen, and then the guest is the sort of product, type of thing. um, but yeah, I think those guys have top of mind when I think about podcasts that I'm listening to often. Conan O'Brien for his humor, I,
Hmm.
I love that, and his quick mind. um, is a top of mind, I'd say, those guys. Yeah.
Do you typically look for people more in our industry or outside of like our niche?
Uh, for it's funny because I do listen to quite a few jujitsu podcasts, um, but I also listen to other stuff too. I think subconsciously I just enjoy this other stuff, and I think it informs the discussion as well, or perhaps the style of how it comes through before you sort of find your own voice. Um, but I think it's more of an unconscious thing for me. I'm not consciously going out there to to look and stuff. I'm just more like in awe usually when I listen to someone's podcast, and it comes up where I'm like, wow, God, they're so good at that. They're so good at conversation, or they're so good at humor, or the whatever they're editing, or
Yeah.
the product and stuff, or marketing, even too.
Yeah, absolutely. I listen. I don't listen to Tim Ferriss,
Mm,
but I listened to an interview with a YouTube duo called Colin and Samir on YouTube,
hmm,
and he came on their show, and him just as a guest and then dropping like these knowledge bombs to Colin and Samir about how he does everything.
mm,
Dude, I was like blown away
wow.
by like his intelligence on just interviewing or being the interviewer and interviewee. Like I was like, man, and it kind of every now and then I hear someone or hear like an interview or a question that kind of like reignites like my desire to kind of like I always want to improve. Don't get me
Hmm.
wrong, but then
Yeah,
you hear something and you're like, man, that's just kicking it, like putting fire under it. Like I need to go even like read more books or listen to different kinds of interviews. Do you ever
yeah.
have those moments where you hear something where you're like, I need to find my nicheest question like that?
Yeah, I think what you were referring to earlier in terms of when you feel like you're asking the same stuff over and over and you don't want the show to get stale. At least that's how I feel sometimes. I'm like, oh God, here we go. It's me asking the same thing again. But then again, there's another voice. There's always the other side of me saying too. Someone's dropping into this podcast for the first time, or they don't listen to this podcast all the time. So for them, it's not like this rote thing all the time. In fact, I just reached out to a guest, and he's like, I just did 2 podcasts, and I just don't think I should, do it again. I just feel overexposed or whatever. And not the biggest name in the world. And I was just thinking, wow, it's sort of limiting, I'm I don't know if I'm answering your question or not. I'm going off the rails here, but too bad. I want to get this point across. Is he was, and I'm like thinking, it's just different audiences sometimes, and not everyone's listening to those other podcasts, or perhaps they're not even aware of it. Perhaps they haven't heard his particular voice enough, or that kind of thing. So it's opportunity lost. I don't know. So, anyways, I just want to get that off my chest.
No, you're good. No,
That was
I
the recent
agree.
wound.
I agree, and I also feel like because as a podcaster, sometimes I will see a guest going around the reins of like the podcast circle within our niche,
Mm, yeah.
and then I'll get reached out by them, and sometimes I'm like, I don't really wanna have this person on because I feel like they've done so many interviews in such a short period of
Mm,
time. I
yeah.
feel like, what am I
Same.
gonna ask that's different?
Right.
Right?
Right.
And then I'm like, I kinda take it as a challenge. I'll listen to like 1 or 2 of their other interviews. I'm like, "Okay, what didn't they get asked?"
Mm,
You know what I mean?
that's a
I'm like,
great
"Okay,
point.
so I'm gonna try to, make this interview the best one out of all of them."
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, no, I think it's great. I do the same thing. You use those past interviews to inform like your interview, and perhaps, either take a pre-existing conversation that they've had to maybe a further point, to a further, so you can get a little more color on it too, as opposed to just rehashing the same thing. Yeah, I fall into the same sort of mental struggles, the conundrum of, should I do this again? This person's been on everything, or I try to sort of, not release it immediately after, that type of thing. But yeah, that's a challenge with these really popular individuals, or someone who really hustles. There's those people that they're so good at hustling and asking and really knocking the door. You'd be surprised. I think you listeners out there, or viewers, on how forthright some people can be. I never had that in me, that bravery to sort of ask and knock on the door constantly. That you know, like I think gets people really far in life often.
Yeah, that leads great to like a kind of like next thing I wanna ask you is I know I've had people reach out to me that wanna come on the show
Mm,
and trying to I'm just sure it's the same way with you. I try to ensure that the listener is the one that's gonna get the most value out of the conversation,
hmm.
and sometimes you people do reach out that I'm not saying they don't provide no value
Right.
to a listener, but I try to think of how my listener will get value from
Mm,
this person. You
yeah.
know what I mean? Because I'm like, I don't want to have just anyone on that asks to come on because I want to ensure that I'm providing value to people. That's the first and foremost. You listeners at home,
Yeah.
I'm sure Adolfo's the same way. It's like
Mhm.
we're very selective on who we ask on the show because we want to ensure that it's quality for you. You know,
Mm,
it's not just like some mundane, boring, no no idea what's going on in the
yeah.
industry or anything like that.
Yeah.
How do you, if you have, how have you like uh steered through guests asking you to come on and then you seeing potential guests that might have not have been a good fit in the long haul?
Yeah, I often try to vet, people in my own way, whether it's like, hey, can you send me a link to some, previous podcasts they've done, or perhaps a academy speech they've done, so I can see how, they sort of speak, and it's challenging. Sometimes you want to get a big name competitor, perhaps they're like super young and they don't have a lot of life experience, so they don't have a lot to offer besides a bunch of wins and medals and things like that, um, which is sort of something to offer because they have some competitive experience, and perhaps you can extract some value out of that. But it's really challenging when I just find people that are a little more seasoned, if you will, have they're a little more articulate, or they have more stories, or they understand how to you know uh, put a point across, unlike I'm doing right now. And yeah, yeah. So I think that's sort of the way to go. But I do find sometimes some of my best shows personally that I like are a lot of unknown professors or something like that. Just completely unknown people, and they're just like, someone is like, "Hey, my this academy owner or whatever, or instructor is fantastic," that they recommend, or I go to a particular camp. Usually it's BJJ Globetrotters that I always talk about, because they just have so many that I'll just, vet through some of those people or meet those people. Um, so yeah, it's something like that, with at least some sort of something that I can sort of research, and then glean for the audience. As you mentioned, we really want to provide value for the listener viewer out there.
What interview have you had in your podcasting career that you were surprised did as good as it did?
God, geez, you know, um, I think one of them is a guy that I really like. He's actually a young guy who's fantastic. Is this individual named Yoshi? Was his
Yeah,
name? And he does the move of the day,
yeah.
and he's just super charismatic and super fun. And I believe he's a judo black belt and jujitsu black belt now, I believe.
Yep, under Half
And
Gracie.
yeah, under health. And forgive me for not remembering Yoshi's last name right now. I'll put it somewhere in the post, or maybe Travis will.
Yeah.
More work for you. And yeah, so that was one. I'm like, this guy's not really well known yet, but he's just a lot of fun to talk to, and he seems like a fun individual. And yeah, and people just really resonated with his message and his energy.
Yeah, I recently had, Kabir Bath on
Mhm.
my show, and that one I kinda knew because the topic is a hot thing right now, the ecological dynamics
Yeah,
in jujitsu, right? So that's a hot topic right now.
yeah.
But the one that I just like my most recent guess, Ben Brandon, who won Blue Belt Worlds, Master Blue Belt Worlds,
Mm,
and he lives down here in Tacoma. Dude, that episode, I'm like blown away how good it did. Like it was a phenomenal conversation the whole
yeah.
time, but he's like no one in the jujitsu community. You know,
Mm,
he's just
hmm.
a guy that lives in my area that won Masters World after after doing jujitsu for 3 years.
Right,
And
right.
like I guess I sometimes, like, I don't even realize it, but certain people just can connect with more listeners, and then also their small following, whatever they have, also are, like, very dedicated to
Yeah,
them, you know what I
right,
mean? And so they'll like, when we both had Maliki on very, very early on also,
right.
and dude, he was like a phenomenal guest, and then everyone that loves Maliki just came over and listened to the episode too, and I was like, "Oh, this is great." Like, this guy really has, like, some diehard, like, following, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
yeah. Another one that I had that just that you trigger in my mind is an individual named Sean Applegate. He's a black belt, 10th planet black belt under Brandon McCaffrey and Eddie Bravo,
Mhm.
out of Atlanta, I believe. And he's very sort of like Danaher sort of approach in that there's not a lot of fluctuation in his energy, and it's kind of almost rote the way he speaks. He
Right.
would talk. In fact, there was a point in the show where he talks to me like this, and he's like, "Dude, see, this is me on 10. This is me excited right now," and you can't even tell. There's like no blood pulse there, whatsoever. But he is brilliant, and a lot of the old school guys and people in the know deep, deep into jujitsu know what a mastermind he is for jujitsu. But I don't think as a whole, like his name had been brought up a lot and he wasn't really in the zeitgeist. But man, after that show and some of his clips came out, it really exploded. It was like and then I know a bunch of his stuff was selling on Fanatics indirectly because of the show. I'm not going to take full credit, but you know, uh, but that was really surprising for me. I was like, okay, this is gonna be an okay show. But as we were getting into it, I'm like, oh, this is good. We're having really great discussion here. This is gonna provide a ton of value. I'm thinking, for myself selfishly, you know. But do you find that too? That sometimes you're going through your show and you're like, wow, this is interesting. I'm learning stuff for me personally, versus, what I mean, I'm taking a lot of value out of this
Oh,
conversation
yeah.
with this individual.
Yeah, absolutely. I think my second interview with Thomas Rosinski was
Mm,
probably one where I was like, that interview honestly was more along the lines like sometimes we do interviews that are like
mm.
selfish. You know
Yeah,
what I mean? Like
totally.
I want to talk to this person because I kind of want to get like knowledge. Same thing
Yeah,
with Kabir. Like I was like heavy into the beginning of like learning about ecological.
right.
And so it was more along the lines of like I had questions about myself that I was like, I need to ask someone that's more knowledgeable.
Hmm.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's sometimes I was like afterwards, I'm like, man, that was a great conversation. Like I had so much freaking fun talking to these. My one of my friends actually on in my buddy Jordan, he's like episode 11, 12
Yeah.
of our podcast. And
Jordan Pressinger,
during it,
right?
huh?
Jordan Pressinger.
No, no,
Right
no.
here.
Jordan, I don't know how to pronounce the name. He's actually one of my local friends.
Gotcha.
Um,
Okay.
but during the interview, it was just a he was like our longest for the longest time. He was our most downloaded interview up until like we started getting like bigger name
Right.
guests.
Right.
But during it, it was just like such a fun, entertaining conversation between friends. And that was another big eye opener too. I was like, man, sometimes the chemistry is really what just sets an interview
Yeah.
apart.
Right. Yeah.
It's like if there's good chemistry there, it doesn't matter what we're talking about. Like it's just a blast to have a conversation with the person.
Isn't that cool? Yeah. I had one of those with a coach. He's Danaher. He is Danaher's first black belt. He's a guy named Mike Gemario out of New York. And I love the guy. I mean, we just clicked immediately. And like we text each other still, he's
Yeah.
just a fantastic human being, a genius, in terms of jujitsu. A monster back in the day, just a fantastic instructor. Yeah, that's always amazing when that kind of thing happens. You know.
Yeah. Isn't that crazy? Like I've talked to some people in through the podcast that I looked up to outside of jujitsu before I ever even started jujitsu, but now we
Mm.
have the common ground of jujitsu where
Mhm.
I'm like, dude, I get to talk to this person. Like I've loved them for like 10 years. You know,
Yeah.
not love that, like it sounds kind of weird. I've followed them
Yeah.
around.
Travis is in love with this. Multiple
I
people
have
all the
locks in
time.
there. The reason the cameras face this way is because I don't want their shrine to be like seen.
Yes.
Has that surprised you, the friendships that you've, like, kind of, like, grown from being a podcaster or the people that you've keep in contact with afterwards?
Yeah, I'm more surprised that these people will even give me the time of day after the show, you know what I mean?
Bro,
That
amen.
they're just like, it's always cool to me, like just a good human being, you know what I mean? It's like such a diamond in the rough thing when it happens like over and over because you're lucky if it happens in a quarter, within a
Yeah.
year or something like that, let alone like, in a whatever weekly basis or something like that if you're lucky enough to do this and interact with these people. But yeah, I think the good human aspect of it always blows me away. There's that old saying sometimes like don't meet your heroes. And I think we both have been blessed enough to like meet a lot of our heroes or stumble upon heroes and you're like, wow, they're amazing human beings. And I'm super lucky to be sharing this moment with them right now.
Yeah, 100%. It's such a blessing, to be able to share, an hour with some of these people or especially because a lot of them that we talk to are so busy. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yeah.
And when I first started asking people to come on the show, dude, I was so scared. Like, you've been doing interviews basically, or you have been doing interviews since day one, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And
for a long
so
time.
I
Yeah.
don't know how you have, like, overcome it, but dude, when I first started, it was so hard to ask people to come on the show because
Yeah.
I felt like we were just so small, like, no one's gonna wanna come talk to someone that has 50 monthly listeners, you know what I
Yeah,
mean? But it was
yeah.
quite the opposite of that.
Yeah, it is so cool, and that's why, like you mentioned before, Malachi Friedman, or for me, like the Silver Fox Prevec, or someone like
Mhm,
that, who will just take, like you said, take the time out of their insane schedules. I mean, insane schedules. These people are workaholics, burning the candle at both ends. You know, jujitsu is not a gigantic money making endeavor,
mhm.
typically, and for them to take out the time to take a risk on some relative unknowns or something like that. Um, and invest in their own marketing perhaps too, you know, which I think is incredibly wise of them in retrospect. And you see why you know, why they are so successful, because they take those risks constantly. They fail constantly. You know, I'm sure there's a ton of these podcasts that come and go, and you know, ours won't be around forever either. But for them to do that and push ahead and take that risk is it's very smart and super cool too, right?
What's one interview that you did that you kinda wish you don't enjoy, the most? Like, which one of them did you do where you're like, at the end of it, you're like, "I could have done that so much better."
Oh my god. Oh, Brailer Grout. And I think and Brailer is a gigantic heavyweight, I believe, out of Legion, you know, under Keenan Cornelius.
Mhm.
And fantastic dude, you know, really great talk, super nice human, really funny guy. But man, this one was specifically, you know, tech related. So we ran into every Wi-Fi issue you possibly could.
Oh,
We stopped like every, oh my god, it was like 10 minutes or something like that. He was jumping to different rooms, you know, and we were having some pretty good conversation too. But just the constant interruptions and stuff of us having these technical issues, especially Brailer with his Wi-Fi, even though he works in tech as I think a data analyst, and you know, all this stuff too. I couldn't. Brailer, if you're out there, come on, man. We got to get this together, man. We got to do a part two to fix this. No, but just the, you know, gymnastics you have to do in editing as well for
oh,
something like that. Uh, you know, it takes so much time, man. You know, but yeah, there's that, and then there's the other individuals who do as I'm sure I've done within this episode, the likes, the the, you knows,
yeah.
that type of thing. Um, and unless you got some AI or something to rip it out, which I don't, because I'm not making any or a lot of money on this at all. Um, you got to manually rip those things out. If you do that kind of thing, you know, that's my thing, is like some shows are heavily edited, such as mine, and others just free form conversation. How do you feel about that stuff?
I I feel I do a little bit of in between. I feel I do edit the podcast, um, like that, but to the point where I'll take out long, awkward pauses, or if I feel that the guest if there was a question that I asked that after in post, I'm like, "That really didn't fit the conversation," I'll remove that question. Or if same thing, if there's lots of technical issues, which any remote podcast is going to run into, syncing issues, dropped Wi-Fi, camera overheating, or whatever it is,
Hmm.
laptops dying, things
Hmm.
like that. Um, I'll have to edit that, but I try to we talked about this before press and record. I don't have a whole lot of time to dedicate to editing the podcast,
Yeah.
and so I really just try to I put it in the timeline. If I have mental notes of where stuff happened that I was like, I got to remove that, I'll remove that, and then it's kind of just multicamming it, ABC, ABC, however I want to cut it up.
Yeah.
But I would prefer to have a little bit more editing in with, like, B-roll or graphs or
Mhm. Yeah.
something that captures, like, a visual, 'cause
Yeah.
we're video podcasts, well, especially you're a video podcast now too.
Yeah.
So, there's things that I'm like, if I had more time, I would put more effort into, like, the visual
Ooh,
side of
that
it.
eats up so much time too, man. You know, it's funny because I was just talking to Matt Kwan about this again too, and he's one of those guys like I'm not going to edit anything. It's all in there, you know. It's all, and I think Scaff was like that too, Matt Scaff, or like whatever. But
Mhm.
his is usually him alone. Speaking, what's that like been for you? I'm curious about your solo episodes. when it's just no guest, and you're out there. I'm sure you're putting together some sort of outline. I know you probably have some sort of topic that you're talking about, or, a few of these things. And, it's been pretty engaging. It's cool to hear people's personal journeys. That's a lot to put out there.
Yeah, so John and I started off with just John and I BSing with each other, and then bringing a friend in every once in a while to capture their journey. But I think it's easy for me to have solo conversations because the whole premise of the show was to document our journey
Hmm.
and to capture the trials and tribulations that you go through in your journey,
Right.
right? So to be able to share that with people has been kind of easy because it's just something that I've been doing since the beginning. And it was the reason we started the show because there's not a lot of people out there that are doing that,
Hmm.
especially at a low level jujitsu like I do.
Right.
You know what I
Oh,
mean?
dude.
So it's like that. Sometimes it is awkward if I'm not fully prepared for the topic or if I'm not fully prepared for what I want to talk about. I feel
Mm.
like I ramble quite a bit in some episodes. But after, like, surveying my audience, a lot of people prefer solo episodes,
Yeah.
to tell you the truth,
Yeah.
which
I
is
believe it.
crazy that it's kinda humbling too that people want to hear just me for
Right.
30, 45 minutes.
Right.
You know what I mean? And to your point, yeah, I do an outline. Uh I use AI to help out with that. So I'll have a topic, I'll have points that I wanna hit, and I'll use, like, ChatGPT,
Sure.
Google Bard,
Yeah.
whatever to kind of, like, help me gather my thoughts, and then I'll edit that how it fits me and my audience better.
Mm.
And then I'll kind of have an outline, and I'll go through it and talk about it for 30, 45 minutes. And I love it because, I mean, like you said, I'm not gonna be doing this forever, so I might not even be doing jujitsu forever, so it's gonna be cool to hear myself in, 10 years from now listening to
Sure.
episode 2 of Elbows Type Podcast where I talk about getting knee on belly and almost dying.
Right. Right.
How come you don't do solo episodes?
I've been playing with the idea. I just, I'm just, I don't want to be the product as personally. I like being the voyeur. So I like, watching someone like yourself or something. And what I do love about what you're doing too is it's much more relatable, for the majority, I think, of jujitsu practitioners out there than, as I was mentioning earlier, perhaps a younger gold medalist, a high level competitor who that's all they do, you know what I mean,
Mhm.
is just train super hard and win tournaments all the time, and that's their life. I find it much more interesting to listen to someone like yourself who has, a family or perhaps is coming upon that stage in their lives of where they're, entering that family stage and how your life's transitioning, the challenges of both personal and jujitsu and how they integrate and what you're getting out of it, etc. For me, that speaks much more to me. But yeah, I don't know, man. I don't know. I still like I don't know. I'm still like the interviewer, I feel like, I think that's where my strong suit is at this point. Perhaps I'll dabble in that a bit more. I did one episode in the past where I felt I really needed to get it off my chest was one of
Yeah, the financing with
yeah,
during the
or
mhm.
jujitsu during a recessionary time, and yeah, so I it's there was that, I think something speaks to me really hard. Perhaps I, you know, walk upon that sort of that path, but we'll see. I don't know.
Yeah, I think I messaged you, I, like, Instagram DM'd you right when that episode released. I was like, "Adolfo, is this a solo episode?"
Yeah.
You mentioned, though, not to, like, leak our DMs, but you mentioned that you were nervous about releasing that. Why?
Yeah, I think it's just I didn't want it to come off as too negative or anything like that. Number one, I don't want to influence anyone in a negative type of way. I just for me it was more like really important for academy owners as something that I felt was really important to consider. Of like how things are going, and we're seeing how sort of the world is going now. And I don't want to get political, or financial, or anything like that. But even though I did in that particular episode, but I've never really had to put myself, or I don't put myself out there a whole lot with my personal perspectives or my stated opinions. I might indirectly do it the way I edit a particular show or something like that, or with certain clips I'll pick out. Then you can kind of read between the lines and see what I'm thinking, if anyone cares. But yeah, I just when it comes to jujitsu, I just don't like being an absolutist about anything, really.
Yeah.
So I think that's one thing is that I don't want anyone thinking that, oh, this is this guy and he thinks this particular way.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree. One thing that I look up to you for, and I always talk about, that is probably my biggest fault when it comes to um, being a podcaster, interviewer, you know, jujitsu practitioner, is I'm not a student of the game. You know what I mean? Like
Mm,
I don't necessarily listen to a lot of jujitsu podcasts.
mm,
I don't watch a lot of jujitsu content really anymore.
mhm.
I've only bought one instructional my entire life, and it was Jordan Pressinger's half guard.
That's a great one, man. Yes.
It was really good.
Goodbye.
And so one thing I look up to you is like you're such a student of the game to me. Like you are
Mm,
so good with knowing people's histories.
mm,
Like 10 years ago. I mean, I'm talking like you talk when it comes to like 10th Planet guys,
mm.
you're going so deep in the weeds of their like history. I'm like, how are you doing this? Where do you get this information? Do you have a team that helps like the hot ones, like Sean Evans that researches for you? Like, where do you find this information? How do you come up with like such great in-depth topics with these guests?
Yeah, I tend to go really hard on research. You know, you brought up Nardwar, who
Yeah,
is a
I love him.
music interviewer of, you know, through several years now. I suggest you people go to YouTube and Google Nardwar and his interviews. They're fantastic. And one of the things that he's known for is like surprising a lot of his guests with really deep research and gifts, like these very specific gifts and things like that. And he was a huge inspiration to me. And in
Okay.
terms of that and how important for me personally, um, research and knowledge can provide for the show, especially with the guest. It sort of triggers them to share something unique, oftentimes, or leads to interesting discussions, and they get sort of electrified sometimes by, hey, this person has went sort of above and beyond, or something like that. So oftentimes I mainly do it for the guest, because it opens, you know, certain doors that may or may not have typically have not been opened. But yeah, when it comes to jujitsu, I'm a sicko about it. I pretty much, you know, I go deep in a lot of it. I think much to your sort of perspective also though is that I'm not crazy about watching competition
Yeah, same.
footage all the time, because that does get kind of tiring. I mean, you know, people are like, "Oh, Nogi." I can't ever imagine it going really mainstream. Um, but I don't know. Maybe that's just my limiting viewpoint. But it just seems like such a personal endeavor, and there's, I mean, there are moments of excitement and highlights and stuff that are really cool. Um, but yeah, I'm just not of that camp quite yet. But anyways, going back to the question, yeah, I think deep research for myself, you know, whether it's like Googling hardcore, finding their LinkedIn. I mean, I go crazy sometimes into like seeing their personal Facebook pages and seeing like what high schools they went to and just, you know, where they're from, you know, and where they've moved. I mean, I get kind of crazy sometimes about certain guests. Yeah.
Ready to spice up your Thanksgiving? As we dive headfirst into the mountains of mashed potatoes and cranberry sauce, let's talk about the unsung hero of the holiday season, the Manscaped Lawnmower 5.0. That's right, it's time to go cold turkey on the old razors and take care of your own turkey leg with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Visit manscaped.com, use code ETP20 for 20% off and free shipping, and enjoy Thanksgiving in the style with the Lawnmower 5.0 Ultra. Gobble gobble, boys. Listen, Manscaped has been the longest sponsor of the podcast for, I don't even know, 2 years now almost. And it's an incredible partnership. I love everything that Manscaped has sent me. And I am so thankful that they've been the sponsor of the podcast through another holiday season for you guys. Honestly, the Lawnmower 5.0 is a true game changer. They keep refining the design to help more and more men with the dual color LED spotlights for multiple skin tones. And just everything about this just gets better and better. Honestly, all the products you get from them, you can't miss. So the gift of Manscaped doesn't stop there though. The bundle comes with 2 free gifts: the Manscaped Boxers 2.0 Premium, absolutely love them, and the Shed 2.0 travel bag. Get 20% off and free shipping with code ETP20 at manscaped.com. That's 20% off with free shipping at manscaped.com using code ETP20. Be thankful this holiday season for the best gift of all from Manscaped. Your balls will thank you. Thank you, Manscaped, for sponsoring this episode. Yeah, I love it, man, because I've done it. I don't do it for every guest
Yeah,
because I
it's
try
a
to stay.
lot.
Yeah, I try to stay topical with a lot
Yeah.
of guests recently because I once again I go back to the value thing. Like, not saying that their journey isn't valuable,
Mhm.
but if I'm having a guest on, typically it's because I see that they have value in an area for my audience,
Mm.
whether it's like you know, jujitsu for older practitioners,
Mhm.
finding instructionals, or just like their how they view certain aspects of jujitsu. That's where I try to like keep guess. But sometimes, it's you can have those topical conversations, but tie it in like to your point with like stages of their life.
Yeah.
Like, hey, so you were living in Alabama in '98 training under blah, blah, blah. How was that different compared, you know what I mean? So
Yeah.
that's that's
Yeah.
kinda that's kinda like where I go because nothing feels better than when a guest says, "That's a great question."
Mhm.
Like, that's
Yeah.
such a pat on the back as
Right,
as an
right,
interviewer.
right.
Um, and whenever I hear that, I'm like, "Alright, how can I replicate that for the next guest without mimicking the same exact question?" You know what I
Right.
mean? How do
Right,
you do
totally.
that?
Yeah, I think, as you mentioned, but, before that we were discussing, I think for me, it's the research, it's really hard research, and you bring up a great point there, like, you used to be under, this academy owner, and now you're at this academy, and you're at this place, and then often it brings up question or just topics like why that transition happened, and perhaps they wanna share something that they haven't shared before, and, that's always a really cool thing too, is when they say that. They say like, "Okay, I've never talked about this before, but,"
Yeah.
when that happens, that is another one of those really cool moments, and that seems to sort of be triggered from oftentimes that research that you've done on the individual, that or that particular step or moment in their life where they've sort of zigged instead of zagged, and it often brings that up. But I'm curious too, Travis, with you, you're a blue belt, right?
Yes, sir. Still blue belt.
Okay, still a blue belt. Listen to you. And y- so, do you feel like you still have a really good perspective of the day one person, trial person that walks through the door?
I don't think I have the same perspective as the day one trial person per
Mm,
se anymore.
mm,
Obviously, because it's hard to. I've been a blue belt now. It's going to be 4 years this month,
hmm
and so I am quite removed from
mm,
a white belt,
yeah,
right?
totally.
But I think what I do now is, and I kind of mentioned this to you before, is kind of like a shift in aspect of what I can relate to, and now it's more like you mentioned earlier. It's not necessarily the day one trial white belt that's getting smashed like I used to, but more along the lines of like who he is outside of, or who they are outside of the mat, and how I balance the same things they probably balance, family, job,
hmm
training, making the training. How often should I train? Should I feel guilty for doing this?
mm,
All the real life scenarios that I go through now, I think are more along the lines of something that they go through that they probably don't think about because they have that love for jujitsu. But at some point, they're gonna be like, oh shit, I only trained once this week. Like, am I gonna suck now? Am I losing all my my progress?
You're right.
Like, how am I gonna get that first stripe, and things like that? How should I roll with a higher belt? So
Mm,
it's not necessarily the same exact relatable, point of view that I used to have,
yeah,
but now it's kind of like a shift, if that answers your question of
you're right.
what I can be relatable to them as. Because to be honest, I'll probably be a purple belt one day, I'll probably be a brown belt, I'll probably be a black belt, right? And that's not to say that I can't provide value to a day one white belt.
Sure.
But it's just, if I'm honest, it has to be in a different way because the same reason why I started this podcast is it was almost all black belts or high level competitors that had their own shows,
hmm
and it was hard to relate to them
Yeah.
about what I was going through when I walked through those doors for the first time, or my white belt days, or how everything was. You know what I mean?
Right.
So and if I'm honest, I'm not gonna be the same person in 5 years talking about jujitsu that I am 5 years ago. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I think I was struggling with that notion the other day or the past few weeks. Is I started thinking about that again. I've done this for 8 years now, and excuse me, and just thinking, am I, have I addressed the day one white belt lately, and can I how I just I'm feeling farther apart from it, but I still care so deeply about them in a way, and I still care so deeply about like, for me they're so important, the day one white
Oh,
belt,
100%.
because we got to keep this thing going and get people involved. But I'm like, can I, it's becoming more of a struggle. I realize to sort of empathize with the all the things that's going through their head, and it's starting to sort of fade, and I'm realizing I'm starting to lose some of that connection. And so I've just been thinking about. I was curious, where you were in that journey too about that. But
Yeah, because 'cause you're a purple belt now, man, like,
yeah.
8 years, a purple belt. How has your journey impacted your interviewing podcast?
It's definitely helped inform everything, and it typically a lot of the topical stuff, if I go with anything topical, and some of the questions is, as we mentioned before, it's personal. So sometimes I'll be asking about, like lately, I think what's been really interesting me lately is um, the leg system. I'm sort of late to that whole thing because I think we both are primarily gi players or have been, and I'm getting much more into no gi, and I'm enjoying it a lot more, and I want to just dive into it because I'm one of those I'm late to it guys, and I'm older now, so I want to I'm just trying to dive head on into it. Um, so I so a lot of the guests that I'm having, a lot of the questions sometimes revolves around that typical or that type of topical discussion when it's like that. So it's funny how we go through these stages in our game or what a progression in jujitsu, how that informs what we're going to ask or the type of people we have on or something like that. How about you? Do you feel like you've asked these personal questions too?
Oh, yeah, 100%. Because I'll look at my journey, and when it comes to, like, especially the solo episodes, I'll
Mm,
pick something that has happened recently in my journey, and I'll try to have, like, a guest on, and I'll try to do, like, a solo episode about it. And kind of like cover and like once again kind of like for selfish reasons to help me feel better about what's going on or to learn about what's going on with this situation in my journey.
mhm,
And yeah, I 100% like I feel like uh having having an idea of exactly what you want to talk about with someone or with yourself is it's gonna make you grow. I always talk John Thomas talks about this too, is, conversational jujitsu, right? Having a conversation about jujitsu is extremely underrated in people's journeys, right?
mhm,
And I feel like the more people talk about jujitsu, whether it's like theoretical or situational, like, hey, I was here.
mhm,
How could I have gotten out of that? Or X, Y, and Z? What are things I should think about in this position? I think
mhm.
it helps everyone. I think it's a big tool that you can have in your toolbox to uh, mentally prepare or think about scenarios when you're not actually training.
Right. It's so interesting that everything's interesting to me. But the a lot of these professionals that we interview, and what I found, and I don't know if you have too, is oftentimes these high level guys, let's say, I was talking about the leg system earlier, and a lot of these people that I've had on that are leg specialists or something like that, how they contradict each other oftentimes, and their own personal opinions of like what's best and things like that. And so you realize, going back to the white belt days or whatever, you're always looking for, what works, what's the best way, and that kind of thing. And then you realize every way is the best way. I'm
What
realizing,
works
as
for
I
you is
talk
the
to these
best
guys,
way.
yeah, it's just like there's no wrong almost answer in a lot of this stuff because, closed guard's not good in the gi. Closed guard works in the gi. Reverse De La Hiva does not work in the gi, or no gi. It does work in no gi, someone else says, or De La Hiva or whatever it may be. Um, so that for me, that was like one of those eye opening moments too, where I'm like, oh wow, I got to think for myself, and jujitsu is so personal, and the expression of it, it may change from one week to another, but what's best is, perhaps it's for that particular, moment in your jujitsu journey.
Absolutely. What guest has influenced you the most after talking to them that has like really shifted your mindset of a certain aspect of your journey?
Oh man. I think both Carl Prevec has been huge. He's always been like a huge influence on me all throughout. Uh, and Mike Gemaria, I think lately when we were discussing things too on the episode, they've been huge just because they're just so wise, and in terms of having a long term sort of jujitsu journey, and I'm no spring chicken, so I mean Masters 5. My goal right now is just to like you said, I hoped or I hope to be doing this till like the old man, like Helio, till to close to the last days, or something like that. So for me, those guys have really spoken to me in terms of longevity and training smart and that kind of thing for longevity. So effectively, those guys. I'm sure there's other guys too. I mean, they're. I get something from everyone that I speak to. Honestly, that's just personal gold. How about yourself, Travis?
Yeah, I've had a couple guests that have like influenced me quite a bit on how I view what I think is right. Early on we had Roy Dion and John and I
Yeah,
were big into
that's well.
you
That's
have to
right.
test for your belt. You have to take because we're so
Yeah,
influenced by Roy Dean, right? And
yeah,
I talked about it on your show when the
yeah,
first time,
yeah,
and I was like, everyone has to test. You have to test for your
yeah,
belt, and I didn't realize how like of a contentious topic that is within the jujitsu community, right? Because that's how we did it.
yeah.
And everyone that I followed at the time, that's how they did it, right? It was you test for your belts, like it's a knowledge check.
Is that what it was, Travis? Because I remember when I talked to you and John. John, by the way, people of on my show that are listening, was Travis's former co-host of his podcast. This FYI, but I remember John or yourself asking me, what was your test like? And the
Yeah,
trippiest thing for me, the wildest thing for me, was that there was this expectation
yeah.
already in place that they test. So I'm so curious. Like, did you guys think like everyone tests, or And I understand now, given the context.
Yeah, I don't think we knew that thought that everyone tested.
Mm,
I definitely thought it was more prominent than it was.
mm,
You know what I mean? Like, come to find out, a majority of people don't test. The testing is actually a minority in the jujitsu community,
totally. Yeah.
and that was a shocker. Yeah, I remember like, how was your test? You're, oh, I didn't. I was like, how did you get your blue belt?
Yeah. Yeah. I was
What
so
do you mean?
I was
Like,
like, wow. Yeah, I found it so interesting that the question, what I mean, and the expectation of the answer. I mean, for me, I was like, I was kind of taken aback, but it was just so neat to see that expectation, they're already in place.
yeah, and it goes back to like you point you made earlier. Like everyone is like their own ideas of what jujitsu is and how they're supposed to do it and how it's supposed to happen because there's no governing body
Yeah.
of jujitsu, right? The
Thank goodness.
IBJJF is kind of right, but that's like a more of a rule set for competition.
Yeah.
And but it's like it's funny to hear how everyone kind of like you mentioned contradicts everything. And so I think we're you and I or any podcaster that isn't a high level black belt, I think a beautiful part is like our views are always challenged. Like we're not ingrained in anything because we have so many contrasting opinions against our own. It's like really makes us think about like, well, am I right in this situation?
Hmm.
Like
Hmm.
where do I fall on this like line between A and B? You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah, totally.
and is there even a line, between A and B? Like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
everything we do is so subjective. And I mentioned this before too,
Hmm.
and it's like not every black belt is a black belt, right? Like
Yeah.
and this is not saying every black belt could probably still kick my butt. You know what I mean? But there are levels to everything we do. Just like not every blue belt is the same, not every purple belt, not every white belt is the same.
Right.
Um, so to really focus on anyone else in your journey besides yourself kinda does you a disservice because
Hmm.
everyone is so different. Like
Right.
we have like a general idea of like, yeah, this person's a blue belt because
Yeah.
they can perform at this level. They've been doing jujitsu this long, right? But there's no real set in stone. This is what makes a blue belt. And I think back to the testing part, I think that's kind of like why we were so attracted to testing because it put a quantitative aspect to or qualitative aspect to jujitsu for us. Like this is a blue belt; they can do this. So it gave kind of like John and I something to strive for because we're like, hey, so if we can do these, that means we will be a blue belt. You know
Mm-hmm.
what I mean?
Right.
So
Sure.
maybe that's why we were also like so enticed by testing for belts because it put a value to our knowledge and it gave us something to kind of like, okay, so if we can hit these wikis, we'll be
Mhm.
getting our next belt. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I could totally respect that. I can respect, yeah, anyone that does it their way. Yeah,
Yeah. But now I'm
it's
like, I
good.
don't ever want to test for a belt again. It was
I know,
terrible.
meaning,
That was not
you know,
fun.
I thought of you the other day because the other day, depending on when you guys are listening to this, which I'm sure is in the future, so it'll be several days ago, I got my second stripe, right, for my purple belt. And out of nowhere, my academy, my instructor, he makes all of us pair up against each other and do a match in front of all of our peers,
No,
for
thank you.
a little 5 minute, but it turned out to be a 3 minute thing. And I think everyone was really confused and shocked, like, what's going on? So it was like a mini test kind of thing or an
Oh,
overview kind of thing. And I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? But it's funny because we did it. It was fun. And yeah, and I thought about you guys because I was like, whoa, this so it brought up the whole conversation within my head again of like, and I went back and started researching what other guests had mentioned about it because I'm so interesting interested after talking to you both about just the whole concept of that not only jujitsu testing but just forgive me ideologies of how jujitsu should be instructed, how academies should run, etc. You know what I mean?
yeah. Do you when you like research a guest, do you do you ever try to ask questions that will not cause controversy, but are kind of like hot topics to what's like going on within the community right now, or like once again, kind of like those like uh contentious ideas of like whether it's belt testing, white belts heel hooking, or working on legs and stuff like that. Do you ever not necessarily like clickbait it, but you're definitely like this would be a great piece of content for me to repurpose?
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I oftentimes I actually sort of warn the guests ahead of time, saying, "Hey, I might play devil's advocate sometimes," which I rarely do throughout the show. Um, and I learned this from speaking to Henry Akins once, and I felt that I had asked something that I don't think it got him upset, but I think definitely triggered a point. I can't remember what it was, something maybe about the cross collar choke or something like that. That no, it was a move that isn't a cross collar choke. Actually, that's not a high percentage finish in statistically in white belt competition, and the bow and arrow choke is far and away the highest one. And I think maybe rear naked choke or something like that, but it's and maybe an armbar, but cross collar choke was way, 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 way low. And it's not to say that it's not effective. It's just that it's not, it's just not done at white belt. It's not a common finish. And and it really got him sort of, energized about this particular topic to discuss this, and it was in retrospect really valuable, to I think to think about it because you can look at all the various perspectives, and he informed, taught me that, and for me to think further that perhaps isn't this move isn't taught in depth a whole lot, or we don't spend a whole lot of time on it, and people just aren't going for it a lot in competition for whatever reasons. So yeah, I think that brings up a lot, and yeah, sometimes now I do think about that. Sometimes it's like, what potentially can I push back on to get some interesting discussion?
How do you navigate if you are having a guest that isn't, because I'm sure you've had it too, that isn't being very cooperative
Mm,
in
hmm.
answering questions? Like they'll answer short or too
Mm,
long,
yeah,
or you're like, that's not even what I asked, bro.
yeah. That's a tough one. That's when you get your shorter episodes in terms of my editing. But that's where the power of the questions that we have or the particular topics that we can bring up uh, come are such an important tool in our tool belts as podcast hosts, and to extract, as you said, if you're not going to get a whole lot of value out of them, you try to get those little nuggets that you can, because it's not going to be an hour's worth of great clips or something like that. This is going to be like maybe 15 minutes of good clips that you're going to pull out, really extract the gold for the listener. but yeah, you do try to touch. I mean, that's where you're touching on the obvious stuff. Where's the strong points of this individual? What have they done lately? What are their future plans? What's exciting them? What are their future things that are going to excite them? That's when you try to get that kind of thing, because they're going to share some stuff, that they can. But sometimes some people are just so nervous too that they just like you said, they give you the monosyllabic answers. Yeah. So yeah, there's that.
Uh, how soon do you feel like a guest really kind of finds their groove and like relaxes during an
Mm,
interview, especially if there's someone that doesn't have a whole lot of experience being on podcasts?
yeah. Um, Yeah, that depends. I definitely I feel like 5 minutes in for me, usually we're in a pretty good groove. And yeah, it's going, and oftentimes, as you mentioned before, it's a lot of the pre-discussion that we have that oftentimes isn't on camera, that gets them sort of, relaxed. And once
Yeah.
I let them know, hey, my goal is to make you look as good as possible, because you've
Mm,
been so generous with your free time, to speak with me. And I hope you've seen some prior episodes, because you'll see that I'm not, there's no gotchas here, nothing like
yeah.
that. Um, so it's getting them really comfortable, and then, as you mentioned before, doing the research, pulling out those special things, those Nardwar moments, if you will, where they're like, oh, they're like, oh, okay, cool, we're cool with each other now, and oh wow, you've really gone above and beyond, or something like that, and then yeah, that's when I think things start to click.
Yeah, I would hate to have like a Bill Burr moment where my guest just stares at me and he's like, "You're an idiot."
Yeah, yeah, that'd be
Bill Burr's
terrible.
notorious for that. If you guys don't listen to Bill Burr's interviews when he's on other people's podcasts, he's known for making people just feel extremely awkward because they'll
Yeah,
just ask
so dry.
crazy mundane questions where he's like, "What is this for? Like,
Yeah.
why am I even here?" And that's like something I get really nervous about. Is one question I ask in pre-show before I ever press record is, and I got this from Tim Ferriss, was, "What do you need from this interview in order to provide you the most value?"
Mm,
Right? So, I asked them that beforehand, that way I ensure I know what topics they do wanna cover, whether
mm,
it's a
that's
coaching
great.
program, a book that's coming up, their online academy. I always make sure I ask that, that way I know that they want to talk about this, and I know for sure that they'll have an answer and go on to where I can branch out
Yeah.
from that question, you know what I mean? Is that
Yeah.
something you do too? Like, what does your pre-show look like to before?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of things I touched on before. In terms of like, look, my goal, stating the goal. My goal is to make you look good. That's really important. I'm going to push back on some things, and it's not a disrespect. It's for the value of the listener, that kind of thing. Being respectful of their time, um, and letting them know whether what kind of show it is, whether you edit or you don't. Um, and that giving them, allowing them obviously to share their socials and whatever, if they're selling anything, perhaps their wares, because they're spending their time with you for free, that type of thing. It's funny because one time I was talking to Chris Howder, and he's just a legend in jiu-jitsu, and he has this thing called combat base, which is his personal, I think, online instructional type of thing, and he didn't talk about it for the longest time in the thing, and I'm like, hey Chris, we need to talk about it. I spoke with his wife, who's a really lovely woman, and she's like, he tends to not push the thing, and can you help him, or if he doesn't, so I would occasionally, I'm at the, hey, combat base, let's talk about it. So yeah, just doing them right,
Yeah. I know that's something like, I'm so grateful, like, we mentioned earlier, that these people wanna spend time, whether it's an hour, hour and a half, and just,
yeah,
talk shop, it's
yeah,
it's an incredible thing that I don't know, I feel like a lot of people don't realize, it's like they don't owe me an interview, a little small town dude that is podcasting in his master bedroom,
right. Yeah.
So, but no, it's definitely cool. How do you deal with getting ghosted or,
Mm.
rejected for an interview?
I'm cool with it. I respect that. Not ghosting, but definitely. I prefer the quick rejection. Like, hey, would you like to be? No, no, whatever the particular reason is. Cool. I'm totally cool with it. And then I can just move on. I would rather not get, yeah, it sounds great. And then you just don't hear from the person for a long time. Then you have to do the follow up and the follow up and the follow up. And And you're like, huh, and I can't take it personally because I understand they have a million things in their life going on. I'm sure, like we all do. Um, but it's hard not to sometimes a little bit, you know.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, yeah. So I just kind of push through. I move on. I mean, there's a lot of interesting people in the world to talk to, and a lot of hidden gems out there. It's hard to find them sometimes, but
Yeah.
yeah.
That's kinda like I've never been rejected to for someone to come on the show,
Mm,
um, and that's mainly because I don't ask a lot of big names to come on the show,
mm,
people that are, you know, gigantic,
yeah.
uh and it's not because I don't wanna interview them, but like you mentioned, I really you have such an eclectic group of guests
Hmm.
that's once again inspired me to be like, "Okay, I don't need to get the same exact people everyone else is interviewing." Like,
Yeah.
who are these Jordan Robbie, right? He was
Yeah.
got 3rd place, he lives down in California. If you guys haven't listed his interview, he's same age as me, and he competed at Masters World, and he was just a good conversation.
Yeah.
No one once again, Ben Brandon, not anyone, like,
Yeah.
not saying that that sounds kinda mean, but I mean, like, in the jujitsu space, they're not,
Yeah.
like, selling instructionals or anything like that. They're just an average person that does jujitsu, and it has accomplished something that a lot of us will never do again or will
Yeah.
never achieve, and so I'm like, "I gotta talk to these guys. How do they do it?" You know what I mean?
Right.
And so, a lot of times, the people are grateful that I've asked. They're like, "Oh my god, dude, yeah, I would love to come. I've never done a podcast before. I would love to
Yeah.
do a podcast."
Yeah. Yeah, that's always wild when you talk to like that black belt, that new academy owner or something like that. He's like, "I've never done a podcast before." And you're like, "Oh, cool. Let's see how it goes." It's great. Versus, and you know what else is funny too is when you get these sort of semi big names or what we would think are semi big names within the jujitsu zeitgeist and then you talk to other normal people, jujitsu practitioners, like, I have no idea who that person is. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
There's a lot of that, too, which is cool. I'm like, okay, great. You
I
know?
think that's me with almost every interview you do. I'm like, "I have no idea who this person is, but I'm
Yeah.
gonna listen."
Yeah, that's
Like
rad. I
and
love
then you're,
that.
like, sitting
Yeah.
there talking to these people, and you're talking about, like, who they are in the industry, their accolades, and I'm like, "No idea this
Yeah,
person ever
whatsoever.
even
Yeah.
freaking existed."
Yeah, man. And there's other people that, like, are, unknowns who you just like we mentioned before that you're just like, "Oh my god, so much value, so much great stuff." Yeah, a lot of these globetrotters, like Charles Harriott, who is a fantastic discussion. This physics teacher, an amazing
Wow.
jujitsu game, former breakdancer guy. Just he loves to talk about jujitsu. This other guy, Josh Janis, he's a black belt out of Michigan, I believe, or something. Yeah, and just has this really unique perspective on jujitsu and like this whole truly the gentle art sort of is his thing, like trying to do no pain jujitsu kind of stuff. And I don't know, just other perspectives are just so cool, and talking to these people, and if you can get like as we have some decent amount of listeners out there, and they get this value, get to learn something, getting another perspective, and question their own jujitsu, and that's always good in my opinion. So, what have you been thinking lately about jujitsu? I'm curious, like what kind of techniques or what have you been playing? What's been, I guess, top of mind for you lately?
Recently, it's been more of coaching. I recently
Oh,
got, the chance to start coaching at my academy.
oh wow, that's
And so
awesome.
that's why I was bringing on like Kabir Bath to talk about the ecological approach to jujitsu because
Interesting.
um, as a coach coming from the fitness industry before,
That's
right?
right.
I was a
That's right.
CrossFit coach and everything like
CrossFit.
that.
Mhm.
And I've always loved coaching.
Yeah.
It's probably one of my favorite things I've ever done in my life.
Yeah.
Um, and so when I had the opportunity to start coaching jujitsu, I was like, I can't mess this up. Um, I have to do my research because I don't have the knowledge of a black belt or someone that's been doing jiu-jitsu for 10, 15 years, right? I
Right.
don't have the technical ability of these people and I coach the fundamentals. So I'm like, how can I provide value to someone that's coming to fundamentals that a blue belt is teaching and they can walk away feeling like, okay, that was a great class.
Wow, that's
So
awesome.
really it's been teaching and coaching has been like my big drive recently. And what the saying I listened to or I talked to Blake from Blake Up Today on Instagram. He does like This Week in Fatherhood. And he's a jujitsu brown belt. And one thing that he said during his interview before I even started coaching that really stuck with me was he who teaches learns twice.
Mhm.
And so I was like, that's great. And so now when I look at a jujitsu technique or something to do with jujitsu, I'm kind of like, how would I teach that?
Wow.
What you know what I mean? Like, now I'm
Yeah.
like, how can I, with my limited abilities, show a day one white belt or fresh on the mat white
Mhm.
belt, or even an experienced practitioner, because we have experienced practitioners. We have blues, purples, browns come to our fundamentals class. Like, how can I teach this to someone that's been doing jujitsu much longer than me
Mm.
and still have them gain something from it? Right.
Right.
Because anyone that coaches knows that sometimes, uh, when you have like a higher level athlete, whether it's uh, in fitness or whether it's jujitsu, Krav Maga, Taekwondo, or whatever, someone that has been doing it much longer than you and you kind of look up to them, it's
Mhm.
very intimidating having them under
Yeah,
you.
I'd imagine so. Yeah,
You know what I
right?
mean? Like, I'm
Yeah.
like, dude, this blue belt is way better than me. This purple belt's way better than me.
Right.
Like, how am I going to provide value to this person? That's really
Right.
what like drives me a lot right now.
So what have you been doing? And then have you said, you know, for this whatever armbar, whatever, uh, hey, you advanced guys, you can, do this and that and that. Do you do like caveats like that or?
Yeah, so, that's what I'll, most of the time I'll do is when I do have, like, the higher belts. Well, yes and no. So, the the way I coach right now is through task-based games, and so
Wow.
I'll have a game that, has an objective
Mm,
with constraints in it, right? I'm sure you've heard about all of this
mhm,
recently, and so I'll have constraints based on the game, and then if there's, like a upper belt that's training, I'll kind of give them maybe a different constraint or
mm,
something that's a little bit more challenging because
mm,
if it's a fundamentals class, they don't need beginning practitioners don't need crazy constraints,
mm,
or they don't they're already going to have a hard time with a lot of things. So I try not to make the constraints on them too crazy. It's more along the lines of like, hey, say we're playing in side control and I want you to keep the shoulders pinned to the mat while controlling the hips. Go.
mm,
Right?
mm,
And then so I'll do that for like a brand new practitioner. But if it's a higher belt, I'm be like, hey, so I want you to keep the shoulders pinned to the mat, but I want you to use wedges instead of hip control.
mm,
And then they'll start thinking about it that way.
mm.
If someone at home that's listening to this, they're probably like, that doesn't sound like very good. But whatever, come to my
You're right.
class, try it out. But so that's how I kind of look at it in a different aspect of um, constraints. A constraint-led approach isn't a generalization, it's based on individuals. So if the individual has a higher skill base, the constraints need to be based around their skill base.
Mm,
If a person has less skills, then you need to have the constraints less skilled, or based on their skill level also. So that's kinda like how I approach coaching now.
wow. So it's like a sliding scale. It sounds like for per individual.
Yeah, and
Wow.
it's as a new coach using this method, it is the hardest part of individualizing each training aspect to, um, the different skills. Most of the people in the I'm lucky, most of the most of the people in the fundamentals are new practitioners, so
Mm,
the constraints are typically the same for everyone. But if I do have a blue, purple belt or whatever come in and I'm
mm,
like, hey, so this might be a little too easy for you. Let's
mm,
your constraint or your what I want you to do is this, or don't let your opponent do this.
mm.
And it kind of shifts their attention a little bit from what everyone else is doing. They're still getting the same idea, but it's just in a different way.
So are you all in ecological? Or are you still are you guys doing technique or
So
hybrid?
I'm not full 100% into ecological because my lack of knowledge in application is
Mm,
hard to be 100% in it. I still need to do more research, listen to more people, talk to more people,
mm,
and figure out because as for me, as once again as someone that doesn't have all the knowledge in the world, coaching that way is very hard because I don't understand a lot of times why we do certain things in jujitsu. You know what I
right.
mean?
Yeah.
So it's like yeah, we do this, but why do we do it? How can I get someone to understand that's why we do it if I don't fully understand? So I need to build my base of knowledge of jujitsu in order to fully commit to something because as a junior coach, I'm still learning as it is, right?
Right.
And so
Jeez.
like Greg Souders talks about, he's obviously full ecological, individual based, blah blah blah.
Mhm,
And but he's been doing it for 8 years, so I can't. And he started doing it as I believe he started doing it when he was a black belt. So his base level of knowledge to help his practitioners was already leagues above mine.
Mm,
You know what I mean?
yeah.
So I'm sure once I start feeling more comfortable in my own jujitsu coaching skin, then I'll be able to dedicate more of it to that because I still fall back on like, hey, this is how we do an arm bar. But
Right. Sure.
in that whole ecological dynamics, you don't you do teach, but you don't. It's not step by step, and I still find myself when I'm uncomfortable with the situation, I still go back to that step by step in order to make sure that there's value to the students.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting, man. So yeah, I mean, teaching. I mean, you learn so much from it, and it's such a natural inclination. Even the joke is, the one stripe white belt. I love, that I love these jokes, right? That they want to teach the white belt, because everyone, I think a lot of people find value in that, and they feel of value, when
Yeah.
they can do that kind of thing. It seems to just give a lot to yourself.
Yeah, I think the whole saying of "you can learn something from everyone" is true in a sense, um, but I unle unless the day one white belt has some sort of grappling experience,
Mm.
the chances of learning something from that person is probably relatively low because they don't have a grasp, they don't have a base understanding of what we're even doing anyways. Not saying that they can't like look at something in a different aspect and then bring that up, like, oh well, why do we do that? And then it gets your brain thinking, so you're learning from that person,
Mm.
like why do we do it that way, right? But I don't think they're going to step up in front of the class and be like, hey, so let's do this technique. You know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm curious because before we were talking, I remember you had another owner at your academy, and that person I believe left, and then the academy sort of changed. Uh, and I don't know if there were other steps in between, excuse me, to where you are now. So and then even the introduction of this ecological approach. Can you talk about to me? And I'm just so curious from when I believe it's Cody, right, who was the
Yeah.
original guy when he left,
No,
and
Cody's always been the gym owner.
okay, forgive me then. And how the culture has changed to where you guys are now, and even incorporating this new sort of paradigm in terms of ecological into the academy. Can you talk about that progression for the listeners and viewers?
Yeah, so, Al was our original black belt that we're well, he was the
Right,
second black belt we
black
were
belt.
under during, COVID. He ended up leaving the gym, and our new black belt Sean Gaspire, who's a former, like, collegiate wrestler, coaches wrestling in high school, high level black belt under,
You got
he's
to
a
research
Carlson
that.
Gracie black belt, whatever.
Yeah.
He's a he's a Carlson Gracie black belt, and so since he's very much when he took over, it was very much, we were kinda like what you call, like, the surfer, laid back jujitsu academy. No one really rolled super hard. It was competitive, but it wasn't, like, smashing people. And then when Sean came, he just pretty much mopped the floor with the gym and was like, "What are you guys even doing?"
Right.
And so, there was, like, not in a bad way, but he
Hmm.
definitely exposed that we all could have been learning something differently, or our
Gotcha.
our mindset during roles was completely different.
So this is
And
black belt number 3.
yeah, black belt number
Okay.
3, and he's still there now. It's
Okay.
wrestling. He leaves during wrestling season, so Cody takes back over. Cody's now a 4-stripe brown belt, so he's real close to getting his black belt.
Right. So effectively a
Um,
black belt. Okay.
and so Cody was the one that kinda introduced me to the ecological approach
Hmm.
because he was hearing Greg Souders all over the place. He's like, "Hey, you have a podcast, interview Greg. You have a podcast, interview Greg." And I never
Hmm.
did. I've never have.
Hmm.
Um, and so Cody actually talked to him and he's like, "Man, that stuff is great. You should look into it." And so I didn't look into it until I started coaching or
Hmm.
until he asked me to start coaching. And then I really like started diving into it more. And I was like, man, this stuff is great.
Hmm.
There's a Rob Gray. He's a PhD down at ASU. He's like one of the leading scientists on the whole part of it. And so I listened to his podcast. Uh, and then I listen to people like Greg Souders, Kabir Bath. There's a whole bunch. Kit Dale, is
Yeah.
a lot of the task-based gaming or gaming task-based games for jujitsu.
Right.
And so I kind of just like slowly started implementing it more into like how I looked at jujitsu. There's a there's a ecological dynamics for BJJ Discord channel where there's like almost 1,000 members now that I go in there, ask questions. A bunch of people that crazy like scientists within the community
Wow,
that are
that's so
also do
great.
jujitsu that have studied ecological for a long time. They're in it
Wow.
and stuff like that. And so I just kind of like through Cody's own uh curiosity about it, and then it kind of like rubbed off on me, and then now I'm very curious about it too. But like I mentioned earlier, I'm not 100% on it yet because I just don't have a firm understanding of it. And so I feel like I'd be doing a disservice to a lot of people
Mm,
that I coach that if I don't fully understand it.
mm. How have you been feeling as of late in terms of like what's your conditioning looking like in your recovery and stuff?
Stress with added, not eating as well as I should with
Mm,
with the added not making it to the gym as much as I should. I've had a lot of like personal life stress lately, and so I'm actually no longer going to be training in the evenings. Now I have to work in the evenings, and I'm gonna have during the day off. So we're starting like a 10:30 a.m. class. Thank
oh
God.
wow.
Yeah,
Hmm.
so which is gonna be great. But
Awesome.
I have been going to the gym recently. The last couple of weeks, I have been going to the gym more recently. I've been tracking my food, trying to hit my macronutrients for the day because it's all very familiar to me.
Mm,
But like, yeah, man, it's hard like we mentioned before we press record the first time, it's hard to fit jujitsu in with such like heavily weighted personal life stuff too, like
yeah.
my kids, my
Hmm.
job, uh, my wife. So I often talk about on my show the hats that I wear in life and how depending on the situation, the hats change order,
Yeah,
right? Like
for sure.
almost always father is gonna be number 1 hat that I
Hmm.
put on during the day, and then when the kids go down, now I can take the father one off, and put it, 2 or 3, and then the podcaster or the practitioner or the content creator hat can come on, and I can work under that umbrella for a little bit, and then, it's like, "Okay, well, now I need to put my husband hat on because I need to go fill my wife's cup." You know what I
Hmm.
mean? And sometimes that jujitsu hat doesn't come on for a couple days or a week. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah.
the jujitsu practitioner hat doesn't come on because I can't. I have to be realistic with my time and what value does going to jujitsu for 2 hours give to my family right now? And a
Hmm.
lot of times they don't. I hate to say, it, but it's a very selfish reason. But we all need that selfish time,
Yeah, of
jujitsu.
course.
But it
Yeah.
also helps with my mental health
Yeah.
too.
Yeah. Yeah. That's wild.
How do you
Those.
navigate all that? Because I know you have wife, kids, and all that stuff, day job.
Yeah, I'm a little bit later stage in life than you. So I mean, I burned the candle at both ends much harder when I was a younger man, went through a lot of the things that you were probably some similar that you're going through at this moment. And I think the majority of people and practitioners in our particular demographic go through, so it's a challenge for sure. Like you said, I'm pretty particular about my to-do list and my methodology for doing all that type of stuff. Um, and I do a lot of the GTD stuff, the getting things done type of things, and I'm using Todoist as my digital tool to
Oh,
sort of to create like different sort of Kanban boards and things like that too. I'm kind of a nerd in that respect, and that doesn't mean I get stuff done. Sometimes I spend too much time even playing with that kind of stuff of organizing your life rather than getting stuff done. But when it is working, it's working. It works, because I'm very forgetful of a lot of small details and things like that. So yeah, it's definitely a dance, as you mentioned, to keep the priorities a priority, right?
right.
And the right ones, to make sure you're working on the right thing at the right time, I think is huge.
Yeah, and that's not to say that I'm not always 100% correct with the hat that I'm wearing at the time. Sometimes it needs to be the incorrect hat in order to get
Mm,
something done so I can put the correct hat back on.
right.
Like I mentioned beforehand, like sometimes I stay up until 11 o'clock midnight
Oof.
editing. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because I had an interview earlier in the day, and then I had to take the podcaster content creator hat off, and I had to go put the other hats on. And then I have to I'm like, well, I have a deadline for this too. So I have to put the other one back on, and it's not the right time for it, but I need to get this stuff done also because
Hmm.
of commitments as well. So man, it's such a dance that we do, and I
Yeah.
applaud young practitioners that don't have those responsibilities yet, that are taking full event, like burning the candle at both ends and
Yeah.
getting after it. Because I mentioned this also in a recent episode. It's like a lot of the times we don't realize when we are doing so much in our lives, um, when we're younger or when we don't have certain responsibilities, sometimes you can build like a negative mindset for future your future self, because you look back at like, oh man, I used to be able to train so much. I used to be able to do this, and now I can't. And you can have like a real glass half empty mindset, because if you look at these unrealistic expectations that you used to have because of your former life, and then you go into training now and you're like, dude, I could be here for an hour and a half and that's
Mhm.
it. Like there's no hanging out afterwards. I
Mhm.
need to make the best time possible of the hour and a half. And having that, and me personally having that mind shift from training as much as possible, being at the gym as much as possible, even being married with kids, to now it's like I can't do that. Like there's so much more I have to get done at home and like be a dad, that it took a little bit to get used to.
I
Honestly,
know,
it
I was
was
gonna ask you
definitely.
if are you okay with that? Are you okay?
Mm,
You know?
I don't think yeah, obviously, like, I made the choice to have the kids,
Mhm. Yeah.
uh, but it more along the lines of I not being okay with it doesn't change anything
Mm,
because I have to
good
do
point.
it.
Yeah,
You know
great
what I
point.
mean? Like,
Yeah.
would I like life a little differently? Yeah, I mean, I have young ones right now. I have a 3-year-old and a 20-month-old, right? So, and a 15-year-old. The
That is funny.
15-year-old's
Would you
very.
like your cake and eat it too, Travis?
Yeah. The 15-year-old's pretty self-sufficient. I'm pretty sure
Yeah.
he's sleeping still right now. It's 11:30 in the morning. But the 2 young ones, it's like I always tell everyone, everything's temporary. It's all a season. This season right now is because my kids are I have 2 such small ones, they take up more time. There's gonna be a point, within the next couple years of when they're gonna be much more self-efficient, and I'm gonna be able to take them places like jujitsu, and I'm gonna be able to do more things if I wanna do again. But
Mm.
as of the season right now, it is what it is. I'm grateful for the life I have, and if I were to say it any other way, I think it'd be very disingenuous, and it would be an "Oh, woe is me" moment, like, "Oh, you no, you" so that's
Yeah.
kinda like where I'm at with it now.
It seems to go back to a lot. I think one of the questions that you guys would ask, I think, at the end of your podcast a lot was something about advice you'd give to a white belt, and things that we've talked about earlier too is not comparing yourself to others. And it's so easy to say, you know what I mean? And in retrospect, now it's you realize how important that sort of idea is, or to practice that, or even though there's always it's gonna slip in those moments going, damn, I wish I had more time like this kid, or I wish I could do more like this particular person, or I wish I was there, I wish I was at this belt, whatever it may be, I wish I could sub these people, whatever. But yeah, when you realize that is, I go back to that, I'm realizing more and more that this is such a personal journey, and it's such a an individualized journey, and there's all these things that come into play, whether it's your finances, your time, your age, your weight, your strength, your all those things sort of factor in together. um that it's going to be just different for everyone. So yeah, trying not to compare yourself and just sort of be present in your own path is sort of the way to go. I remember I was just talking to Junior Casio, and he was saying one of these. He was talking about effort on the mat. When they're there, he's big into this effort thing. All the time, and I agree with some of it, quite a bit of it, but a lot of it came down to being present. Just to be present, and realizing more and more the importance of that.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that quick point, focusing on your own journey. This was for the first time in my journey, uh, I've really had to, like, hone that in. We had belt promotions last week, and I didn't get a stripe, and I did get my purple belt, and 3 other blue belts that have been doing jujitsu in less time than me got their purple belts, right? And they 100% they deserve it. I don't wanna make it sound like they don't. These guys absolutely crush it. They spend a lot of time training, they compete. Younger than me. Well, one guy's the same age as me, but his kid is, the same. He only has one kid that's the same age as mine, my oldest, and so he gets more time to train. And I'm not saying that at all, but it was the first time where I was like, "Oh shit!" Like, yeah, dude, like this is real. Like I'm not gonna get promoted every time that I think, I'm probably ready for it
Mm.
because I just can't dedicate it to it.
Right.
And that was the first time where I was like, wow, like this is I've never had to really focus on it before because I was always getting a stripe. I was very consistent in training, but these last couple of months, like I mentioned, it's just been hectic in my personal life. And I was like, there was that moment. I was like, well, what if, like what if I made it to training every night? When was there moments so that I could have went to class and I didn't? And I started like replaying all these moments in my head, to be honest. And I was like, man, I messed up. But I didn't. Life happens. There's um like you mentioned, like John, he was injured. He had like double shoulder surgery
Yeah.
and he kept getting injured during class. And finally he's like, I just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
He's in his mid 40s, his kids are doing stuff. And so he's he had to quit. Jiu-jitsu just wasn't in his life journey anymore.
Hmm. Hmm.
And he doesn't regret it. But he's thought about coming back every once in a while, but I think
Hmm.
he's at the point now where he's like, it's just not in the cards for me. It's
Yeah.
just
Sure.
not something that I strive to think about doing. And that's something too that I have a hard time with too, is, I'm thinking like, well, why do I keep going to jujitsu? And I'm like, well, because I love it. It's a good release for me. It's a good being around like-minded people that want to do hard things is a fantastic experience,
Hmm.
And so that's what motivates me to keep training. And also I can't do the podcast if I don't do jujitsu because it's a jujitsu podcast. So, but hey, Adolfo,
Yeah, man.
we've been going for quite a while, man. I want to be respectful of your time as
And
well.
yours
If
too.
you can give one tip to a brand new white belt, what would it be?
Try not to compare yourself to others. Yeah, going back on that, if you can, try to just really focus on your own journey. It's super easy to say that. It's super hard to do.
Oh,
It's
100%.
it's such a mental thing. That's like, it's not a physical technique or anything like that. Jujitsu thing. And I think it'll help you in life overall. It's something I learned very, very late in life. I'm still practicing. I think we all are. We vacillate in and out of um, this habit of comparing ourselves to others when really it's just, putting one foot in front of the other and taking ownership really of our practice. And if you can do that, I think it's a good first step. And I think it'll serve you throughout your jujitsu journey.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I mentioned, I'm having a hard time doing it right now. So, hey, if people want to follow you and check you out, where can they find you?
Yeah, check me out on Instagram, Forever White Belt Show. Everything's there. We got a link tree. You can go to the link in bio there. We're on all the platforms. Listen, watch, and really appreciate it so much. Thanks so much for your time. Thanks, Travis. And
Hey,
what
no,
about you, Travis? Where can we get more information about you and everything
yeah,
you're up to?
elbows tight everywhere. If you do elbows tight, I'm pretty sure after if you guys listen to my show, you're gonna be in class. Someone's gonna say, "Keep your elbows tight," and
Yes,
someone that yeah, you're like, "Oh, wait, Travis's podcast."
the best name ever. It always comes up. Yeah.
So it happens in our class. Like people were like, yeah, so in this position, keep your elbows tight, and everyone like looks at me, and I'm like, yeah, that's right, baby.
Yeah. So
So
perfect.
yeah, elbows tight, elbowstight.com if you want some sweet swag like the shirt I'm wearing. I'd rather be
I
rolling
love your
for sure.
swag. I love
Yeah,
the new
yeah.
designs. That's so cool.
Yeah, so I made this myself, came up with the idea myself and everything like that. So if you guys want to check out that, support me that way. Yeah, elbows tight everywhere. Go follow me on Instagram and YouTube and stuff like that. So, but thank you guys so much for listening and watching at home. If you're listening to Adolfo, if you're listening to mine, thank you guys. I greatly appreciate it. And remember, no oil checks here. Peace.
Right on. Peace. See you guys. Thank you.